What is up, everyone? Jeremy here. Listen, I am so beyond excited to finally be able to reveal to you and announce the launch of my first drum sample plugin. This is 1.5+ years in the making, and I am calling this Drums of Destruction Sample Pack. All right, so in this video, I'm gonna give you the full rundown on this sample pack that includes the drums that were recorded, how it was recorded, and we'll do some audio samples both in context and soloed, and even solo each individual drum and talk about everything you're gonna get. First, the information on the drums. This is my Pearl Master Series. These are the all birch shells, which sound fantastic. That is the kick and all 4 toms. There's 2 rack toms, 2 floor toms, and you're gonna get 3 snare drums, and each snare drum was recorded in 3 different tunings. So you have low, medium, and high tunings. And that is across both the close mics and the overheads and the rooms. So there's stereo overheads and stereo rooms, and you're gonna get those for all the toms, the kicks, all the snares, and all the different tunings, the whole shebang. And just some quick information about what you're gonna get in the pack. So obviously we've talked about what drums you're gonna get, but for each of those drums, you're gonna get a Trigger 2 TCI file, which includes multi-velocity and multi-round robin samples. So this is where things come to life, right? Like, it makes it sound super dynamic. Each hit is totally round robin sampled and across multiple velocity layers, up to, I think, 13 different velocity layers in these samples. So you have a great dynamic range from super, super soft, everything in between, and then all the way up to rim shots, which you'll get on the snare drums. There's an articulation in the TCI, so you can do standard hits or rim shots. And then in addition to the Trigger 2 TCI files, which again you'll get for the kick, all the toms, and all the snares, you're also going to get some one samples for the kick and the snares. Now these are kind of pre-mixed, if you will. They're already pre-blended with the close mics, the overhead mics, and the room mics. There's a little bit of compression on them for some added sustain and punch. And these are meant to just be to quickly drop into your productions and add a more consistent, punchy hit for every hit that happens. That's what you're gonna get in the pack. And then of course you're gonna get every single individual sample that I recorded. So this is over nearly 6 gigs of audio files and TCIs and one-shots. So it's a big pack, there's a lot to it, and I think you're gonna dig it. So now, let's go ahead and jump into the DAW and have a listen to what these things sound like. All right, so just to kick things off, I've got a session up here that I put together and recorded some stuff to demo this pack. And so we're just gonna have a listen to this, and then we'll dig into soloing the drums and each individual shell, just so you can hear what they sound like. But this is the audio sample with all the drums in context. Absolutely sick. I love it. All right, so that's the in context example. Now I'll just give you a few seconds of the drum solo so you can hear what just the full drum mix sounds like by itself. All right, so there you go. There's a quick example. We'll go to the end here because this is a little bit of a different beat back here. Yeah, love it. Awesome. I just love that little pattern there. All right, so that's what the drums sound like in the mix already. So again, focusing on the shells, the kick, snare, and the toms, these are all my samples. So how am I doing this? Because as you can see, I've got this MIDI here. And so what's happening is this is running through a MIDI drum VST. And then when the output of that VST comes out, I'm just sample replacing the shells with my samples. To do that, I'm just using trigger 2. So as an example, here's the kick. We look at trigger 2 and you can see the mix knob, it's 100% of what's coming out of trigger 2, and these are my samples. So now would be a good time to just kind of run through what each individual sample sounds like and talk a little bit about them. And so for the kick drum, so there's one kick drum in this pack. However, this was mic'd with 4 different close mics. So you get 2 kick ins, a kick out, and a kick sub. So you get a kick in dynamic mic, which was the SE V kick. Then you have kick in condenser. This was a Behringer BA19A, I think is what it's called. It is a boundary condenser mic, and this sits literally on the pillow inside the kick. Fantastic mic. Then you have the kick out, which was another condenser on the outside, pulled back a little bit away from the outside head to create a more open sound, and we'll get to this one. It's probably my favorite of all these. And then the kick sub, which is of course the Yamaha sub kick, and it's going to be a lot of the subby frequencies really focused around the fundamental frequency on the low end of the kick. So soloing these, we'll just kind of go through each mic and then I'll add them together and you can see how it all comes together and what they each sound like and how they complement each other. And then keeping in mind, as you adjust the levels of these, you can really change up the sound of this kick a lot. So even though it's one kick, you've got these 4 mics to play with and it's very versatile. So this is the kick in dynamic. This is the SEV kick. So that's what that sounds like. Then you've got the kick in condenser. So you get a different sound, and of course they're totally different mics, condenser versus dynamic. So right there, because those are so drastically different, you can play with the blending those to your heart's desire, and it totally changes up the sound of the kick. But I want to note the dynamic, because it's just inside the kick port, you have some pretty decent attack you can hear on the top end, but it has a lot of low end. So you may not need a ton of the kick sub, if any at all. I've got it blended back quite a bit, but let's keep going. And what's probably my favorite mic on this kick is the kick out, this condenser mic. It is so open and airy, but still has a strong punch to it. And when you blend this in with the other mics, as you can see, I've got it blended in almost kind of in between the condenser and the dynamic. It totally changes the game here with this kick sound. So this is what it sounds like on its own. Just absolutely love that sound, kind of open and airy, almost like a close room sound, but not quite, because it's literally right there by the kick drum. So then you blend that with the other 2, and it all kind of comes together. Right? So if I get rid of the room, so that is just clearly all up close, just in your face, no kind of open and airiness to it. You add in the kick out and you get that open airiness, just sounds massive. And then the kick sub, I don't even know if I should sample it. Like, I'm gonna crank it up so you can hear it. But if you don't have a good sound system, you're not gonna really hear much. It's just low fundamental sub frequencies. I mean, it's starting to distort there. So if you hear anything, you're just gonna hear the distortion. But yeah, again, pulling this kind of way back because I don't really need much of it. I could probably mute it and you probably wouldn't notice the difference, but I've got it blended in there just a little bit. So that is the kick drum. Let's move on to the snares. All right, and so for the snare drums, as I mentioned, there are 3 of them, and those are the Ludwig Black Beauty, the Ludwig Superphonic, and the Mapex Black Panther Sledgehammer, all 3 fantastic snares. So again, I've recorded these in 3 tunings, low, medium, and high, but for now what I wanna do is just give you an example of what each of these snares sound like in the different tunings. So I've got the snare soloed here, and I'm gonna get rid of my buses so that we're just focusing on the snare and not adding any of the additional processing here. All right, so this is the Ludwig Black Beauty in the low tuning. Super beefy, low tuned snare. It sounds fantastic, and you can hear those velocity layers coming into play here, where with the blast beat being much faster, it's a softer hit. And then you really get into those harder hits, you can really hear the difference. Keep that in mind as we continue here and you really notice it. So now we're moving on to the same drum, Black Beauty. This is the medium tuned. Love the sound of that medium tune one. That's probably my favorite. But then we also have the high tune. So if you are looking for something like a cattle decapitation type of drum production, you want a very high tuned snare. He uses a very high tuned snare. It's almost exactly the fundamental of the high tuned snare options that I have here. And you'll really notice it if you go listen to some cattle decap and then listen to this high tuned snare sample, you're gonna notice it's almost identical. And here's what it sounds like. Absolutely love it. So I'm gonna take this back to my medium tune. Okay, so quickly talking about the effect samples before we get to the other two snares. So we have Lil Papa, and this is literally recording of a snare drum just hit in a certain way that gives me a lot of top end and not much low end, if you will, but I've also processed out a good bit of the low end, so it's just kind of a top end crispy snap with a little bit of ring to it. And I'll give you an example of what this thing sounds like on its own. That's it, right? So a lot of top end snap, a little bit of ring there in the middle, so you can tell it's actually hitting a snare. And so as we pull this down and then we blend it in with the actual snare drum, I'll start with it off and then add it and kind of unmute and mute, and you'll really hear the difference. Listen to that top end snap. And then I'll really kind of pull it up so you can really hear it more prominent. Huge difference, right? And because it's an actual hit on a snare drum, it blends very well, obviously, with a snare. The other one I have here, this is called Hiss Slaps. This is just white noise, but just a few samples of it and then quickly faded off so that it creates a very sharp, like transient attack with this white noise, which is a trick back from like the 80s, I believe. So here's an example of what this sounds like. So you can hear it's just like quick, just shots of white noise, right? So as we blend, and this one is because it's a very strong, like transient, just a very quick attack of white noise. You don't need to blend much of it at all. So I'm gonna pull it quite a ways back and then we'll blend it in here. Clearly hear how that adds a nice crispy snap on the top end again. So both of those are really great for adding some nice attack on the top end of your snare samples, especially, like I said, if you're working with a dark sample. All right, so moving on to the Ludwig Supraphonic. We're gonna go ahead and solo the low tune version. Again, really great sounding low tune snare. It's got a little bit of nice mid-range ring in it, which really kind of helps bring things to life. You can of course process that out if you want with a little bit of EQ, but I actually happen to like the ring. And then this is the medium tuned. Great sound right there. Now, then we get into the high tuned. I mean, I think this one really shines in the high tuning. That sounds fantastic. And then the last snare is the Mapex Black Panther Sledgehammer. And this is a fantastic drum. So we're gonna go ahead and solo the low tuned. Just super beefy, punchy, low tune drum. Absolutely fantastic. The medium tune. Absolutely sick. And then high tuned. Again, I love all of those. They sound so good. Now let's move on to the toms. All right, and so we're gonna start with Tom 1, and I'll let you hear what that sounds like. That's all I really got in there, just a quick brrr up. But you can kind of get an idea of what it sounds like here. I mean, it's really good. It's got some nice sustain. Listen to that last ring out. Sounds fantastic. And I want to point out for each of the toms, I have both a top and a bottom mic on this. So you're going to get both. And you can blend them to your heart's desire. If you don't like the bottom mic, you can get rid of it. I happen to like it because it provides almost exactly the same sort of sound as the kick out that I was referencing before on the kick drum, where it's kind of this open, airy sound, not quite as much of a strong transient as the top, but when you blend them together, it sounds fantastic. That was the top, I'm sorry, that was the tom 1. Here's tom 2. Absolutely sick. I love it. Tom 3 and tom 4. Cannons going off over here. All right, so that's the toms. Let's move on to the overheads. All right, so for the overheads, I've got these blended in different volumes here, but for this, I'm just gonna crank them all up evenly. So as we listen to them, it's easier and I don't have to keep messing with volume. So soloing the kick drum, we have just the kick overhead here, and this is a stereo pair, and this is what it sounds like. Actually, let me come over to not quite as a fast spot, just something here. I mean, that just sounds so damn good in that huge drum recording space. And then we've got the snare drum, which I'm gonna have to probably come back to a different spot. Let's just come over here. Absolutely just huge sounding. Let's see, this is the, wrong sample, snare overhead. This is the Ludwig Black Beauty medium tuned. And so, as I said before, you're gonna get the 3 different tunings in both, for all 3 snares in the overheads and the rooms. So you can get a completely consistent sound in your drums. So if you want to use the Sledgehammer low tuned on your close mics, you can do that, and then also use the Sledgehammer, I think I've got it right here, the Sledgehammer overhead low tuned. You could have that room queued up, and then the same thing for our overhead and the rooms. So you get a completely consistent sound as if it was an actual drum in an actual single space recorded at the same time. So then here's a quick example of what each of these sound like. So this is the Black Beauty low tuned room, medium, and high tuned. Just absolutely incredible. I love the way those rooms sound. And then we've got the toms, and so we've got tom 1, tom 2. You can hear the sustain happening there in the room. That was tom 3, tom 4. There you go. And kind of quickly going over the rooms. We'll start with the kick drum. So here's the kick in the room. Let me find those single hits again. It's just better in the room sounds. Just huge. These are quite a ways back in the room, getting just that big open ambient sound of this massive room. And then we've got the snare. We'll come back over here a little ways. Just massive sustain on the snare. Then we've got, and then again, with the rooms, you've got the different tunings. So you've got the low tuned, you've got the medium tuned, and the high tuned. And that's for all 3 snares. And then we've got tom 1. So lots of sustain. Sounds like cannons. Tom 3. Huge. Just massive, massive room sounds. Okay, so that is everything that you're gonna get as far as the multi-layered samples go. So let's quickly run through the one-shots. All right, so let's start with the snare one-shot. So there are, I believe, 11 of these, and we can double check that right here. So we go into the sample pack, goes into snares, one-shots. Yes, there are 11 of them. I've got a bunch queued up, 8 of them queued up here. I'm just gonna sample one of them for you to show you what it sounds like, because these are essentially kind of pre-mixed. There's a little bit of processing on them, some compression. They already have the overhead and the rooms blended in. So the idea here is you just drop these in, blend them in, you know, kind of softly in with your actual live or other samples, and they provide a real consistent hit for each and every hit on your snare, and then your kick if you choose to use those as well. But I like to blend these in a good bit back, but just to add that consistency. So I think this one I had back to like 17.5 dB or so, or something like that. So I'm just gonna crank it up so you can hear what it sounds like. And this is the Snare One-Shot. All right, so that's an example of the snares. So let's go ahead and have a listen to the kick drums. All right, so for the kicks, again, let's just double check, see how many there are. There's not as many in the kicks. There are 3 one-shots in the kicks. So I've got them all three right here. But this is an example of the first one in the pack. As a one-shot, there you go. So you can hear how it's exactly the same hit every time. And you can, of course, blend these in with your live samples to add that consistent, punchy sound. All right, y'all, so that is the sample pack. I hope you are as excited about it as I am. I think this thing sounds absolutely incredible. It took me, again, over a year and a half to record all these. I had to actually re-record the kick and the snare and actually the toms multiple times, but especially on the kick and the snare, they just weren't right. I didn't think they had everything that I was looking for and had to keep redoing it, trying different mics, different setups. Finally landed on what I wanted, and I am so thrilled with how it came out. I hope you dig it. It is now available right now on the website, www.augustroseaudio.com. You'll find the link in the description below. It is half off, 50% off for the first 4 weeks. That's it, for the first 4 weeks only. So get over to the website, buy it right now, download it, throw these in your productions, and you can thank me later. I know you're gonna love them. But as always, tag me in anything that you use these in. I would love to check it out and help share it and spread the word about your content. And I just want to say thank you if you made it this far into the video. It means a lot to me. So thank you again. Thank you for your support. Again, find the link below. And until next time, see you later.